Now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, welcome folks. Thank you for joining us for our November National Farm to School Network webinar. We're going to give it just a moment for people to jump on the line and then we'll get started. Welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our November National Farm to School Network topical webinar, NFSN Seed Change in Native Communities Cohort. My name is Lacey Stevens and I'm a program manager at the National Farm to School Network. Before we get started, I just want to offer a few housekeeping reminders. This webinar will be recorded and archived for future viewing in the National Farm to School Network resource database. You'll also receive a link to access this recording in a follow-up email, as well as links to any of the resources and tools shared by our speakers today. Another note, all attendees are in listen-only mode. As you do have questions, please feel free to put those in the question box on your control panel, and our panelists will be able to answer those questions throughout the webinar. So as those questions occur to you, please feel free to enter those into your question box on the control panel. So we welcome you today to our webinar and to celebrate Native American Heritage Month with us. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, to give you a little background on the National Farm to School Network. We are an information, advocacy, and networking hub for communities working to bring local food sourcing, school gardens, and food and agriculture education into schools and early care and education settings across the country. And as you can see here, our network consists of our advisory board, national staff, over 200 core and supporting partners located in every state, DC, and several territories, and over 20,000 network members. So to move us into our topic of the day, I'm going to turn it over to Elena Paisano, NFSN Program Manager for our Seed Change in Native Communities cohort. Elena, take it away. Sorry about that delay, folks. Elena, it looks like you're muted. Are you able to share?
Thank you, Lacey. Sorry, I was muted. Good morning, everybody. As Lacey mentioned, my name is Elena Paisano. I'm a member of the San Carlos Apache tribe in Arizona, Dene and Laguna Pueblos. So I come from the southwestern part of our country, and I work specifically working with tribal and native communities on promoting farm to school and on really just sharing the great work that's happening out there. Farm to school is something that we are really, really blessed to be able to work with in our native communities, as it really aligns well with our traditional ways. Lacey, could you move me to the next slide? Thank you. So very often I'm sort of tackling this question of food sovereignty, farm to school, what's the relationship? So I'm just going to give a little bit of framing and say, to those of you that aren't terribly familiar, it is no big surprise to understand that our communities, our native communities and indigenous communities, have been feeding ourselves forever. We have sustainable foodways and food systems in place that honor not only our human relatives, but also the earth, land, and animals. And so being able to actually sustain those ways of being and control our food systems is an example of food sovereignty. Next, please. And farm to school, so to sort of add this new context to it, is what I like to think of as sort of like modern branding for really a very common sense and old term that we use in all of our communities, but particularly in indigenous communities. The concept that we are living and teaching between generations, that we are talking about traditional foodways, local food systems, and cultural knowledge as being core tenets of how we interact with our food system, particularly for our youth in institutional environments. Next, please. So the way I really like to look at this is farm to school employs us to use the same strategies that were used to colonize our people to decolonize future generations and take back our food sovereignty. So what I mean by that, to unpack it a little bit, is that farm to school allows us to use those institutions of higher education that have sometimes been used to colonize our people by, impacting our use of language, food, traditional ways, culture, all of those pieces, the story that we know. But the beautiful thing about farm to school is we're able to revitalize and lift up our cultural ways as a tactic, as a strategy for energizing future generations and therefore rebuilding our local food systems and our economic food sovereignty. Next, please. So the other piece of this is, what are the outcomes? Why farm to school? Okay, so it's a great strategy for communities to sort of elevate and stand on our histories in a healthy and in a forward-thinking way. But also we understand that our communities have unique needs around food and nutrition, and that a lot of us have had our traditional foods removed from our daily diet. So farm to school allows us opportunity to revive, to bring back those foods. So heirloom varieties of plants, livestock and animals that we wouldn't traditionally see in the school food movement. And to also bring back a way of teaching that is in alignment with our cultural teaching. So experiential education, storytelling, being outside, whether that's foraging or working the earth through gardening. So farm to school really does focus on rebuilding healthy Native communities. Next, please. And so I am really fortunate to be able to work on a project that we call Seed Change in Native Communities at National Farm to School Network. And this has been a project for the past 2 years dedicated to work with 5 schools from across Indian country. And the goal there has been really to connect these folks together so that they can learn and share the amazing strategies that they're putting to place on the ground at home in their communities, to elevate some of the strategies that are working and share those as best practices amongst Native communities, and to help create representation from Native communities in our core and supporting partner environments at NFSN. And so this webinar is a great example of one of those goals, of really trying to tell the story of farm to school in Native communities and how similar it is to a lot of other communities, and how some of the very same farm to school challenges that we all know very much about are there, but how there are also unique contextual differences that come up, and some of those, impacted by the location of our communities, whether we're very, very rural or isolated, the cultural norms of our communities. So for instance, not everywhere are people traditionally agricultural, so foraging is a big part of our conversations in Native communities. And for those of you that are involved in procurement, you can imagine like, oh, whoa, what about procurement in the school meals with foraging? So these are some of the kinds of conversations that we have as a cohort, and we've been able to come together, I think 3 or 4 times through this 2-year grant, and actually bring these communities together into spaces where we could have these dialogues, dig into training, and be inspired by each other's work. Next slide, please. Great, so I'm gonna go ahead and hand it off, because we're really fortunate to have 3 representatives from the communities that we're working with on the call today. So we're gonna start with them, and then I'll circle back. You'll hear from me again to share the work of 2 of the other groups that are not on the call today. So Brian, I'll hand it over to you.
Elena. My name is Brian Giles, and I represent the Passamaquoddy tribe up here in Indian Township, Maine. The Passamaquoddy are this reservation, Indian Township, has about a little over 300 members, and I work at Indian Township School, Madok School of Wassel, Wooly Gazibesque, that's good afternoon, and Wooly One, thank you. I wanted to let you know, first of all, it's a pleasure to have the opportunity to be part of a group to further the cause of Native food sovereignty and education. My heart is with the Passamaquoddy tribe and her children. The last year of our school program has been successful. You can see there our school garden, and you can change to the next slide if you'd like. I'll tell you a little bit about myself as we begin here today. Again, my name is Brian Giles, and I teach special education. I work specifically in the social skills program that works with children who have high social, emotional, and behavioral needs. I came on as part of the program late in the last year as my predecessor, Donna Meter, was unable due to a knee surgery to continue with the program. I am new, enthusiastic, and drastically underexperienced for such a project, and I was very fortunate to have the assistance of the Food Corps representative, administration, the tribal government to have my back, and Donna's knowledge and leadership have been invaluable to me in the last year, and they continue to be invaluable to me now. You can change to the next slide, please. The beginning of my time in Farm to Cafeteria program started small with the after-school program. We worked with a small group of students to get the greenhouse back up and running after a long winter of dormancy. The students weeded and organized the greenhouse and our supplies as we took stock of what we had to determine our needs. Donna Meter planned a Three Sisters garden and helped to organize the building of 4 new raised beds. Next slide, please. During this time, I began to know the student population in Indian Township and to determine where the greatest needs in the community were. I was able to make connection with local food pantry and school wellness committee. Indian Township, like most reservations, is what one would consider a food desert. There are a few gardens at homes, but there is not a real movement to grow food. I was able to attend the conference at Cincinnati, which was both inspiring and overwhelming. I saw what other programs were doing around the country, and I quickly noted that our program had so much potential. Next slide, please. I reached out to the culture teachers and the cafeteria staff. Our success started with a behavioral intervention. I will tell you a story, which is the Passamaquoddy way. There's a student here, and I will call him Ginap to protect his confidentiality. But here, Ginap means strong and brave. It's the name of a warrior. The word means warrior in Passamaquoddy, and although that is not his name, I feel it suits him best. The student faces multiple hardships at home. His father is afflicted with an illness out of his control, his mother not present in the picture for reasons unknown to me. He walked around school every day with his hood up and his back slouched. He would not high five, handshake, or utter good morning to anyone. I knew right away that I had to get him on board. As we all know, food is life and gardens are good therapy. This student agreed to be part of the garden club at school and showed up religiously for a few weeks. He helped to weed and to prepare the garden. I elected him the leader of our club since the attendance was low, and he was the most active member of our group. Before I knew it, he was leading the younger children groups, and when the Food Corps national team showed up, I elected him to have him lead our group tour. They were blown away. His hood came down, and he was excited about the garden club. The enthusiasm spread throughout his friends. I elected to have the students do the daily watering, and he and his peers begged me each morning for the keys to the greenhouse to water our beloved seedlings. At this time, we collaborated with the community food pantry, and we grew all the seedlings for the food pantry. Next slide, please. We collaborated to see where the need was, and we shared what we could with them. We held a community show-off night, and the students led their families to the greenhouse and the gardens to see what they had grown. We were met with, "Hey, Duz," or Gus, what means son or daughter. "I didn't know you were doing this. I'm so proud of you." It was outstanding. Our students had pride in themselves and their work. The gardens began to grow, and we provided the cafeteria with lettuce, tomatoes, squash, and other vegetables for the students and for the food court taste testing and the cooking demonstrations. Next slide, please. At this point, I approached the chief, Billy Nicholas, to tell him of our success, and he offered me 6 acres to grow food for the whole reservation. I had to decline. It was too much too soon. It will take time to reach that point. It is not off our roster, but it's just on the back burner for now. We were blessed with donations from local businesses, the Farm to Cafeteria grant, and the labor of school personnel to get what we had growing out to the people. Tribal members harvested the summer produce, and we hand-delivered it to elders, the needy students, and the summer school program during the summer months. We are still pulling late-season produce out for taste tests and cafeteria use. And actually now we are preparing next year's garden. We're doing a cool lasagna garden program out there in our Three Sisters garden. Next slide, please. Gardening and nutrition goals at Indian Township are multifaceted. We strive to focus on emotional behavioral health, whole body wellness, education, culture, community food sovereignty, and language. We rely on the wisdom of the elders, family outreach, and the support of both the school administration and the tribal government and Food Corps. We have had myriad of success in the last year, and we have increasingly lofty goals for the future. Next slide. We We are working in created community gardens in part based on models Principal Harvey and I explored in the Bangor region and more modified models from research. We are striving to integrate language into our garden model. We are working closely with the language and cultural teachers Brenda Lozada and Regina Nicholas to label the food in the cafeteria and school garden and to create an Eat a Rainbow curriculum that uses Passamaquoddy language with the food choices. Next slide, please. We are researching and planning a school composting group to work to decrease school waste. We are utilizing the research of Brian Parker, who is the main head of Food Corps. This compost group will almost exclusively be student run so as not to place the burden on cafeteria or janitorial staff. A model is being created as we speak with the help of our new Food Corps service member, Allie Cook. We're also, next slide, please. We're also planning a school show-off night. One of the things that we've instituted here is that we want to make sure that the community is involved in the gardening program. And so once a month, families are allowed to come in and the students are allowed to guide their parents through tours of what we've been doing in the garden program, which also gets them more involved in growing at home. We've had students actually take seeds home from the garden program and start to plant gardens with their families. Moreover, we are trying to make the gardening and food sovereignty cool. Next slide, please. Perfect. So one of our programs is we renamed our after school program, and now we're called the Passamaquoddy OG, or Original Gardeners. I'm working with the tribal members to integrate traditional tribal music, hip hop, and traditional dance to create a culture of cool. We're working on a t-shirt and hoodie design that integrates the medicine wheel and the tribal colors and the language to reward our students for their hard work and to give them a badge of honor. And you can see there, that's the design that's going to be on our hoodie, and it will say in both Passamaquoddy and English, we are the Passamaquoddy Original Gardeners. And on the front, it will just say OG, which I think is very, very hip hop. We have been working with the school science teacher, Jared Glett, to do soil tests and to teach about biodiversity with our student groups. This is coupled with the classroom's open use of our school gardens for demonstrations. We have organized field trips to local orchards as well as the culture teachers' maple sap gathering with the students. We are working with the cafeteria staff to see how we can further assist them in feeding our students fresh food grown on site from our gardens. We have been planting winter spinach, garlic, and other brassicas in our greenhouse and using outdoor composting methods that we are researching. We are also reaching out. I just reached out actually yesterday, and we have an orchard coming that we're going to plant indigenous trees, the beach plum, American plum, hazelnut, elderberry, along with non-indigenous trees, apple, peach, and pear. And that should be coming to us this spring. We're installing an aquaponics pond, which we've got in the planning works now with our facilities manager. We're working on writing some grants, and we're also working on trying to recruit a Passamaquoddy tribal member to be our Food Corps service member in-house here so that we have a vested interest from the community in-house. And I think that being said, in closing, I'd like to say we do need to have continued funding and generosity to continue our efforts for the Passamaquoddy children of Indian Township, but the future looks green. Our OG membership is up and our enthusiasm continues to rise, and I am met daily with, when are we going to garden, Mr. Giles? And my answer will always be to K, now. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Brian, for sharing that story. It's just so wonderful to hear what you guys are up to, and I'm really inspired to hear how much you're weaving in. And I just want to open it up for any questions. Brian has to jump off here in about 10 minutes, and so he won't be on the call at the end of the call. So I'm just going to take a call for questions and give people a few minutes in case you have anything that you want to share with Brian or any comments. So please feel free to go ahead and use that question box, and we'll keep an eye on it. And while we're holding for just a moment, when Brian was speaking, it occurred to me that there's something I want to just sort of pull out for all of us, what you were saying around the orchard. And so combining indigenous varieties alongside non-indigenous or introduced varieties. And I'm curious, Brian, did you have conversations with community members or students about that decision, or how did you come to that conclusion to include both indigenous and introduced species?
Part of that decision came with my conversation from Richard Hodges, who runs the Retree Us program here. So when I was out in Minneapolis at the conference, I was fascinated to find out how much indigenous foods directly affect the long-term health benefits of indigenous people. And I'm specifically thinking about the research that we saw on the Three Sisters and the research that we saw about rice. And I guess I just made the assumptive leap that if that was true of ground plants, it would also be true of the orchard. And so it's really important to make sure that we had those indigenous plant varieties there and available. However, I do feel like there is a place for the non-indigenous varieties of fruits and vegetables, because I think the more variety we can have on our plate, the more medicine we have available to us in terms of those plants.
Thanks, Brian. I appreciate that. And for reference, he's referring to the Seeds of Health Native Nutrition Conference that was in Shakopee just a couple of months ago that we saw each other at last month. It's an amazing conference, and they were doing academic research on the benefit of traditional foods to the diet from a nutritional standpoint. I encourage those of you on the call to reach out and do a little searching into there. Looks like we have one question that popped up, Brian, and that's from Jean Whipple, and they're wondering, what strategies do you use within the realm of language to use in the garden?
So several things. We're doing several things. One, we are trying to name and label all of the plants in the garden, as well as foods in the cafeteria, with the proper indigenous name, which isn't always possible, because some of the foods that we serve in our cafeteria were, of course, not here for the traditional Passamaquoddy people, pre-European contact. And so we try to stick as true as we can to that by using we're going to use either the original Passamaquoddy word, or if it's a post-contact or a Europeanized food, we'll use the Passamaquoddy version of that word in the cafeteria. And then the other thing that I do is that I try to just speak to the students here in Passamaquoddy as much as I can. If I'm going to give them some sort of a command in the garden, I will speak to them in Passamaquoddy when I do that. Nudaha, get out of here, that sort of thing. We have a pretty good time, but yeah, so I try to use Passamaquoddy as much as I can when I'm speaking to them.
Thanks, Brian. I really appreciate that. It looks like we have a thank you, so thanks for sharing. And I think we'll move on now. And so we have Nicole Nelson on the line. She's going to share about her community, Heidelberg City Schools. So take it away, Nicole.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nicole Nelson, and I am from Heidelberg. I love that you chose this picture, and I just have a lot to say about it. I didn't know what would be up on the screen. So first and foremost, we are right on the ocean, literally. It's a beautiful place. We're in Southeast Alaska. We get about 120 inches of rain a year on average. It can be more. The reason I love this picture is because it shows a couple things in this. This was taken when I got back this summer. I am serving, forgot to mention, but I'm serving the Haida people here in Heidelberg, and consider it such a privilege to be a part of this community. I'm actually a mathematics teacher in the high school, and I happened to walk by in 2016 when I arrived here. I happened to walk by the garden. It did not look like this at that time. It actually needed quite a bit of work. I could tell it hadn't been worked in a little while. It was unfinished. It didn't have a fence around it. And then after walking by it for many days, I went to go ask the principal, whose garden is that? What's happening with it? And I was simply asked, do you want to be in charge of it? And that's how all of this got started. So anyway, I'm a full-time teacher in the school, but have a passion for gardening. And so to get back to this picture, that is the ocean beyond. We have a beautiful location here in Heidelberg, and being a partner with Farm to School has been wonderful. We've been able to get this garden fully fenced. We've been able to get it finished. We've been able to put up a little building there in the background. As you can see, that's our garden shed that we store everything in. And we've also been able to put up a mini greenhouse that is still in the makings there. This was taken this summer when I came back from doing some traveling. And so we have a mini greenhouse now as well right there. So love that you chose this picture. Also, I find it rather fascinating. Prince of Wales Island is where we are located, and it is spelled W-A-L-E-S, but many people do spell it as Prince of Wales because we have a numerous humpback whales that visit us. So I thought that was rather cute there to have that Prince of Wales Island right there, Alaska. So next slide, I'm just going to give you a little bit of what we've been doing in pictures here. So here's our garden. As you can see, we were able to put a fence around it. And for those of you who aren't familiar, we have to have fencing here. It's not so much for deer, although that is part of an issue, but we have a lot of dogs, and the dogs will come into the garden and dig things up and also do other things that we don't want them to do in the garden. So a fence was mandatory, and that was something that we worked on right away. Next slide. Here is getting ready for planting. I've been able to be a part of this process because my principal at the time and now superintendent allowed me to take 1 hour of my day and do an elective course called gardening. And so I was able to facilitate this course, and I opened it up to the high school at first, and there was very little interest. So I was a little bit discouraged, but I went down and talked to my principal, and we both suggested, well, why don't you work with the younger kids and we'll build this into our program? So I said, that sounds fantastic. And so I started working with grades K through 5. And so right here, these were some first, second graders that I was working with, getting ready for planting, getting them out into the garden and doing the work that was needed. Next slide. This was this spring. I had, I believe, 2 classes out here as we were preparing the beds and amending and getting ready for seedlings that we were going to put in. You'll notice my little garden shed in the back. I find this not funny, but it looks kind of ridiculous. It's not fully painted all the way, and that is one of our challenges here. When we have a sunny day, we get out and use it, and so that shed just needs to be finished, but we have not seen the sun here for many days as of right now because of all the rain. So that will get done. It's just currently not fully finished. Next slide. Starting seedlings. So we worked with the elementary and planted all sorts of different seedlings. And behind these boys here, as you can see how happy they are with their little plants that are growing, but behind them there is a cart that we use, a little greenhouse cart. And we use that pretty exclusively, but now due to our partnership, we've been able to have that little greenhouse built that you saw in the first picture. So this will be our first spring that we'll be able to use that exclusively and then continue that process into the fall next year. Next slide. Here are some of our produce from this summer, and as you can imagine, we have so much rain here, and some things grow well. As you can see, we've got peas on our left that literally go crazy for us. Lettuce does really well. We had kale that did really great, raspberries, but we also have things that don't do so well here. We've tried beans every year since we've been here, and they just cannot take, and we just cannot get them to grow in our garden. It doesn't mean we're going to give up, but it simply means that it's a difficult thing for us to grow. Next slide. So this was this fall. We planted potatoes in the spring, obviously, and this year I wanted to get the high school involved, and so what I did is I had another course I was teaching called Creative Foods. And for one of the days I said, hey guys, we've got potatoes that are ready. Are you willing to go out and help me harvest? And to my delight, they were super excited about it. And I got them out there, and as you can see the smiles on these faces, they absolutely loved it. And this is what we've been wanting, obviously, since day one, but knew it was going to take some work. So I'm super thrilled, because what I would love to do at some point is actually have a high school gardening course. But right now we've been focusing on the elementary, but these guys were out there, they were harvesting potatoes and had a great time. Next slide. New project. So we've been a part of this partnership for a couple years, and with the new project this year, we decided that it would be wonderful to get some traditional foods back into the cafeteria here. So we proposed smoking and canning salmon, and then being able to use it in our lunchroom here. I hit a couple roadblocks, I'm going to be honest, and I started contacting people throughout the summer to talk about what kind of things I needed to jump through, or hoops I needed to jump through to try and make and accomplish this. I hit a roadblock when I got to the DEC here in Alaska. They were not comfortable, and they basically quoted me back to the guidelines that smoking and canning is not a process that they recommend right now fully for use in cafeteria. So I did hit a roadblock. This is a picture of myself here on the right, and one of my Haida friends, dear friend Charmaine. I went through the process with her. I've done the process now twice of canning salmon with her, so that I could go through the process so that we would be ready to do this with a class. So here's how I decided, or my superintendent and I sat down and talked about it. Because we hit a roadblock, we didn't want to obviously cancel what we had already planned and had written in our grant. So as part of my Creative Foods course, we're doing a unit on preservation. And so we are basically just kind of moving our grant from basically going to the cafeteria to now the Creative Foods course. So I believe my next slide has my outlook on it. Could you please, oh, maybe it didn't get in there. The last slide was just basically my list of task items that I had written out for this project. And we have done everything for the project. The only thing we have not done yet is smoke and actually can, but we are going to be doing that in the next coming weeks. Heidelberg just recently had a wonderful celebration, a potlatch that was super cultural and a fantastic event. And so we had to put off our smoking and canning until that event was over. And so we literally are set up to do this. The students, this is a high school class, they are super excited about this. And we're hoping to then, once we have it canned and smoked, we will share it with classes as a snack, or if they have a special event, they can use that for. So we are still going ahead with our smoking and canning, but at this point, we cannot necessarily get it into the cafeteria yet. So yeah, so that's basically our new project and where we're at. Just exciting news on our end for the future. We are right now, the school is building a project for a furnace building project, and they came in under bid on some of their bids, and so they are putting a greenhouse actually off of that furnace building. I just found this out. I haven't even been over there to see it, but they are doing a bigger greenhouse that we will be able to use in the future. So people are very excited about the opportunity of farm to school here and about growing our own food and keeping it in our community. And thanks to our partnership here, it has really opened the eyes of people around here as to what are the possibilities. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Nicole. Just real quickly, because we opened it up for Brian, we're going to mix it up. We're going to open it for questions if anyone has anything. Of course, you can hold them till the end as well. But if you have a burning question, feel free to jump in and ask Nicole. And I just want to sort of highlight what she brought up about the new salmon and canning and smoking project. This is a real challenge across all of our communities when we start digging into things that are really quote unquote traditional foods or ceremonial foods. A lot of them do we have issues complying with federal food policy and regulation. So as Nicole was just sharing, that's around preservation, using the traditional techniques of preservation, the indigenous knowledge that has kept our communities alive. We're all here living, breathing to prove that it was safe, it is safe. We have the knowledge, yet it doesn't quite translate into policy. So I think it's safe to say we have a lot of conversations about very dynamic policy issues such as this one. So thank you for bringing that up, Nicole. And the solution to work in your sort of more home ec or foods education environment seems to be a solution that a lot of communities are using when it comes to things like game, mostly meat products, but also things that are lightly processed or processed. And so Nicole, can I just ask you, how are you involving the community in that? I know you've been working with your friend and community member, but do you anticipate other community members coming in to help teach the class or just even take the class? Has that been part of the conversation?
Yeah, so actually that last slide that just didn't get added, we wrote right into this grant a stipend for community members to teach this part, because although I went through the process twice, I do not want to be the one teaching it. I want to be there as an help, and obviously I'm the teacher of record, which we must have, but I wanted it to be solely the community teaching this part. So we have a stipend, and I've already talked with Charmaine and her husband Jim. They are actually going to teach this part, and I'm going to be standing back and just to be there as the teacher of record. So they've already said they'll do it, and we're going to be giving them an actual stipend. And so I know that there would be other people that would be interested in this as well. This was just the partnership or the people that have helped me in the past. So I anticipate this will be our first time doing this, but if this kind of takes off, we would potentially be able to do this as long as we can, you know, get the salmon every August and September. We might be able to do this 3-4 times a year with different students, which could really be, I think, amazing, because although there are some families that do this traditionally, it's becoming a lost art, and especially for our younger generations here. So I really would love to see this, and I don't even have to be a part of it really, except for being the teacher of record.
Thanks, Nicole, for sharing that. And, you know, I really appreciate how you articulated what allyship looks like, working with Native communities, not being a member of the traditional community there yourself. And so for those of you that are sort of wondering, how do I work in this space? How do I do it in a way that feels good for everybody? I think you just told a beautiful story. So thank you for that, Nicole. It looks like we have about 20 minutes left, so I'm going to move us along. Please, if you have questions for Nicole, put them in the box. We'll address them at the end. I believe next we have Ellie, who's going to share, about her school, which is Hardin School District in Montana. So take it away.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me to be on this call, as well as including the Hardin School District in this process. And it's been a really, really rewarding group to be a part of, and very thankful for all of the opportunities and support that we've had throughout the past few years. So the Hardin School District is in southeast Montana, bordering the Absalagare Crow Reservation. And we have a lot of students also from the Northern Cheyenne tribe. And so our school district has been expanding farm to school the past few years. And the efforts within our community, we've been trying to expand by providing experiential learning opportunities that build relationship between students and community to the land and food. Our goal is to partner with local entities and individuals to empower students in learning about traditional foods, preparation, storage, and ceremony. Therefore, we planted 6 varieties of native plants at Crow Agency Public School. Last spring, each grade planted a different berry bush or tree, including chokecherries, elderberries, plums, juneberries, buffalo berries, and golden currants. The orchard was unveiled at the school's annual field day, where students and their families were able to walk through the orchard, taste test the local salad mix, and take home remaining chokecherry and elderberry plants. Over the next 6 months, the Farm to School coordinator will be working with teachers to design a curriculum for each grade to learn about and care for a particular plant. which will be compiled as a curriculum cookbook, detailing lessons and recipes of each berry. Included in the curriculum will be a history of the plants, harvest techniques, traditional preparation and preservation, and recipes taught by elders and community leaders. Once they start producing, fruits will be used in the classroom and school lunch program. This orchard serves as a gathering place for classes, community, resource, and most importantly, a native food source for students K through 5 to harvest, cook, and learn. So one of the examples that the 5th grade class has signed on for their curriculum building is to be in charge of the choke cherry plants. So each grade will have their own variety to care for and to pass on to the incoming class. The 5th grade class in this instance will be in charge of choke cherries, and they will learn how to make choke cherry jam from community members, which they will then work with an entrepreneurship grant, creating the packaging and labeling for that product and then sell at the community market. We've definitely had some challenges, including the weather, and then also communicating how to get involved with the project, making sure that teachers feel supported in this process and not that it's another thing to do or feel intimidated that they may not know how to best incorporate it into the classroom. And so that's why we're working through this winter period to be able to design the curriculum with teachers, with community members to see how to incorporate it into their class, while doing that through a cookbook model so that they will have the recipes and then also the availability to make those in class. So most of our grant has been spent on infrastructure, the weed fabric, the plant, till rental, fencing, those types of things. And then the rest is really for the curriculum development and implementation of lessons so that teachers have that entire support network. We've had a lot of support and cooperation from local partners. One especially has been the Absalage Abundance Group, a local group dedicated to finding food sovereignty solutions within the Absalage community. And that brings together a lot of local partners, including Messengers for Health, local entrepreneurs, and more. We also worked a lot with Little Bighorn College, the local tribal college, and their extension agency. We've had a lot of technical support from Natural Resource Conservation Services to be able to provide knowledge for planting and making sure that we had the right resources going in. We also had continued support from a lot of across the state, including the National Center for Appropriate Technology and Montana Farm to School, and of course our Food Corps service member. So we worked with lots of different entities in a variety of ways, but most commonly we found that being able to share the challenges and successes of the project has been hugely helpful. Many partners were able to offer resources during the planning stages while continuing to follow the project as learning opportunities arise. For example, we're hoping to continue to bridge a partnership between Messengers for Health and our Harvest of the Month program, where we create a Harvest of the Month recipe that includes the berries grown in the orchard, and then continuing to produce a poster set and understanding of the fruits to be able to share out into the community. Very similar to the Rethink Your Drink campaign. That was something that our high school garden club was able to kind of see and really get excited about, and wanting to take that on as their project to develop more recipes, and then including traditional foods. And so that was a great space for us to talk about what traditional foods meant within the community, and then bringing that to the Crow Agency orchard. So now I'll just kind of go over the first picture you saw was our 5th grade students prepping the garden, making sure that weed barrier fabric was covered, and then getting ready to dig so that the younger students could also plant. Here is an example of our Harvest of the Month program, which is K through 5, and we have students that include recipes for carrots, beets, lentils, things that are really important to the Montana agriculture, but then being able to work within those recipes to add traditional foods and food preparation techniques. So you can go to the next slide, please. And so just building, also, like I just said, the food preparation techniques. So we have this Harvest of the Month beef, which we were able to use a recipe from Alma Snell's book, which has been a wonderful resource, and being able to use that recipe that can be used for buffalo or beef, and really being able to bridge that connection between classroom and cafeteria, and having these tastes from our Harvest of the Month to the food preparation techniques. And next slide. And community, and so being able, especially that bottom right picture, that is our high school garden club that I spoke about earlier. Through a grant, they were able to learn about different traditional foods and plants and techniques, and so being able to share that with the Crow School Orchard to continue to be able to incorporate recipes and build that partnership, and make sure also that that knowledge that we have in the classroom in K through 5 doesn't drop off as soon as students hit middle and high school. And next slide. And this is what I referenced earlier, the Alma Snell book, A Taste of Heritage. This has been an amazing resource. I have been in this community for about 6 years now, but I have so much to learn, and I am very thankful for the resources and the people, and so being able to use this book as a guide and to start conversations, and maybe when I don't know the traditional food name, being able to call on this and ask for help and support in figuring out how to bridge that gap and incorporate traditional foods, recipes, and language into our Harvest of the Month, into our classroom, into the cafeteria. And next slide. And that does it.
Thanks, Allie. Sorry, she was referencing some slides and I had a technical issue with them, so I hope that those worked okay, Allie. But
yeah,
I really appreciate
not a problem.
I know, I was like, but I appreciate you telling your story and the great approach that you guys have. I love the idea of those students stewarding the plants and then the knowledge that goes with each type of plant and passing that on to the next generation or the next class to come. That's something really innovative that I haven't heard used before, and that feels really good and appropriate. And so I just want to say thank you, and also open it up again if there's any questions for folks. It looks like we have one from Katie Costello, and she says, have you incorporated products from the native garden, for example, your choke cherries, into the school meals? And if so, did you run into any barriers from the federal food program similar to those that Nicole spoke about?
Yeah, great question. Thanks so much. So actually, we just planted this spring, and so our plants are not producing yet. So we have not yet had any fruits to incorporate. However, our plans are to start with in the classes and in clubs, and with our food corps service member to be able to use in classes. And so we have not yet incorporated it into the classroom, or I'm sorry, into the cafeteria. But that is our plan. We're working on a few ways to be able to do that. One of the main ways that we're doing is the group that I spoke of earlier, the Apsaligay Abundance Group. We are working together to work on the tribal food codes of the Apsaligay Nation, and just figure out where it is right now. It's kind of been at a standstill for the last few years, and so being able to get a better understanding of that and make sure that the community knows that that exists, So being able to use those food codes to be able to get it into the school lunch program.
Great, and thank you, Ellie, for bringing up the food codes. And so this is a movement happening across Indian country right now to really encourage our tribes to define their own sovereign food codes. And the strategy for really working closely with your farm to school project and the tribe is such a vital opportunity as these codes are being solidified. So I really am glad to hear that you guys are taking that approach, because I feel like if the codes were developed in a vacuum, then they might not meet the needs of the school. And so this sort of upfront thinking is such a lesson for all of us that are working on this or considering starting to develop our food codes that act as a sovereign guidance for us to be able to use the foods that we need on our land serving our people. So thank you for bringing that up. Alrighty, well, we have about 10 minutes left, so I'm gonna jump in really quickly and just share a few little bits of information from the other two groups that we're working with in the cohort. They weren't able to be on the call today, and I'm not going to attempt to tell their unique story, but I did pull some of the photos that they have shared, and I can just give you a brief overview about some of the goals that they're working on. So we have the Warm Springs Academy, and they're based in Oregon. They're working in partnership with the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs. And I don't know how many of you on the call are familiar with Confederated Tribes or the concept thereof, but Confederated Tribes work a little bit differently because they are a very diverse grouping of cultures that have been brought in under one entity for purposes of reclaiming identity and land rights as Native peoples. And so what's important to consider is that this might mean that there are a multitude of different languages and customs operating in this one tribe today. And so when we're doing community-based work in Confederated Tribes, the assumptions around everybody sort of coming from the same way of thinking around food, agriculture, ceremony would be flawed. And so it's just another level of complexity working in Indian country. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to share with you these beautiful photos that they provided. And the big goal that Warm Springs undertook for this 2-year project was the development of that greenhouse that you saw in the first slide. And the goal there was really, to get the kids out learning and growing, to align it with language and try to get some community connections. They were really successful in working in partnership with their cooperative extension from the state of Oregon, and as well as some different tribal groups and community groups. They, let's see, I'm looking at their notes. They also had a huge success in being able to institutionalize a culture of health in their school community. And I think that that's what I see when I look at this slide the most, is seeing that not only are these activities taking place in the garden, but in the classroom and then with some food preparation. So for example, they have challenges for the students and the staff around health and nutrition. So they've done things like a Happy Healthy Halloween and the 5210 challenge. I don't know if folks are familiar with that strategy, but it's a public health intervention strategy that a lot of schools are using that talks about fruits and veggies, water, screen time, and physical activity. And so they use that with the students. They also had a huge win this year in that Jefferson County School District, the district that they work with, is implementing salad bars. And so they're really excited, thinking that this is a way to move some of the garden items into those salad bars, since the garden is, as you can see from the photos, they have plenty of infrastructure, but it's sort of up and coming in production. So they were successful in the development of their greenhouse, as well as the raised beds you see the gentleman watering in the center there, and getting the students really involved every step of the way. They also shared with me that they had some quail hatchlings, I suppose is what you would call them, in the greenhouse environment. And so they had little quail eggs, and the students went through seeing what that emergence of quail is like, and having that education as well. So not just agriculture, but also around our animal relatives. And so I would say that their big goals that they shared with me is really trying to incorporate all this great work now that they're piloting it into their core curriculum, which is something that we see as a goal for a lot of communities. And they're specifically focused on the standards-based science testing and integrating the garden into that for their 5th grade groups. So I look forward to hearing more about the success that's coming there, and feel really honored to share a little bit of their story with you all today. Next slide, please. All right, so the next group I'm going to just highlight real briefly is our friends in Hawaii. Malama Kauai is a organization that works on the island of Kauai, primarily with Native Hawaiian populations, around supporting innovative school models, including farm to school. Next slide, please. So for the purposes of this, we're going to talk about they have 2 school sites they've been working in to pilot a 3-year initiative, not only to do farm to school, but to do school lunch at all. So in these 2 schools, there was no school lunch program before Malama Kauai stepped in and started working with the community to bring school lunch. So I was really fortunate to have the opportunity to visit this site. This is Kawakini School. It's a charter school. And so you'll see in the bottom there, their school cafeteria is outside, directly adjacent to their beautiful garden, which is pictured up above. And they were successful, first and foremost, in bringing a school lunch program complete with NSLP to a new school environment, which is a huge feat. Then beyond that, they were able to expand their school garden. They're working with the elementary school and the middle school, along with support from the high school. So the high school students are really focused on production methods, whereas the elementary and middle school are working at the smaller scale and doing more of the education side. They're also using that garden grown produce directly in their school lunches. That was admittedly an easier strategy before they got on NSLP than it is now. There's a few more challenges around that, but it's been hugely successful. Next slide, please. Perfect. So this slide just speaks for itself. This is amazing, right? So first year with a national school lunch program, and this is what they've accomplished. As I mentioned, they're working in 2 sites to do this. This is a profile on Kawakini, the one school. But I have personally never seen over 50% local in the early years of a program. So I just want to really congratulate and commend them for the amazing work. Next slide, please. And again, you can see what I think is really interesting about this is, for those of you in school food, you'll see that the percentage of local foods, the pounds and the dollars, and it's great to see that this really does reflect the cost of that local food and that it wasn't a barrier, the dollars being in the purple, but how much economic opportunity that provides as well for local producers. This does a really good job of showing that. Next slide. Great. So again, I'm sorry that they weren't able to join us, the folks from Warm Springs, Malama Kauai, but if you have any questions for them, feel free to shoot me an email and I'll connect you with them directly so they can share their story and answer your questions directly. So just real quickly, we have a few minutes left. I want to open it back up and see if anybody has any questions to share or comments with the group. And while we sort of leave that time and space, I just want to thank all of the presenters again for taking the time out of your very busy days to share your story with us, and help all of us understand a bit more what are the unique things happening in Native communities around farm to school, and how we might, some great strategies also for how we can be good allies and good partners in that space. I think all of you did such a beautiful job of telling that story. So I really say thank you. All right, well, it looks like we're right up against the hour here, so once again, thanks for joining us this afternoon and for taking the time to learn more about what we've got going on. If you have any questions or are trying to reach out to your Indigenous friends and neighbors to promote Farm to School and share your knowledge, please reach out to me. I'm here for you to support that. And thank you to my fellow cohort members. It's really a pleasure to work with all of you, though I